Hi there, I'm Bass Fox. Welcome to today's video. So I even wrote a script for this one because I have a lot to say. A lot of you have been asking how I made this synth bass sound that you just heard me playing. In fact, there's been quite some interest in synth bass sounds by the bass guitar, by the bass community in general, from the insane popularity of the recently released MXR bass synth pedal to all the requests for a synth block for the Darkglass Anagram. So since I happen to be a synthesist and sound designer as well as a bass player, as you can tell by the massive modular synthesizer behind me, I made this video to share the principles of sound design involved in making these kinds of sounds, as well as my anagram preset. We're going to take a look at the modular and understand what makes up those classic old school synth bass sounds you've heard from Stevie Wonder, Herbie Hancock, and others. Then we will apply those same principles using effects on the bass through the anagram platform. Then we'll dive even deeper into other approaches to bass synthesis, creating immersive atmospheric pads with the Echolocator delay, industrial music type sounds with wavetable synthesis from the Xenodrive, and using the bass to control a natural synthesizer with the Future Impact V4. There's an index below, so feel free to jump around. The anagram presets are already public in the Darkglas Suite. Just search for keywords Bass Fox Synth. There should be at least a couple there, but you should really stick around and watch the whole video because this is going to be a lot of fun. So, all right, let's get started. All right, so let's have a look at this giant modular synthesizer over here. I'm, by the way, Synth DIY guy on my other YouTube channel, where I basically talk about this stuff. So just so you know, if you're interested in going beyond the basics, you can go check out my stuff over there. We go pretty deep into some of these modules. But this is just going to be a bit of an introduction, just so you have an idea of what's going on. How do you make a bass sound like a synthesizer? Well, first you have to understand what a synthesizer is doing, right? So let's do that. So I have an oscilloscope over here, and I have an oscillator. The oscillator is like the bass string, right? It's what's vibrating. Right now I have the sine wave output connected to the oscilloscope over here, and I can bring up the frequency and bring up the volume. So now you're hearing this nice chunky sine wave over here, and as I turn up the frequency, hear that? This is a sine wave. So the sine wave is like a really basic waveform that doesn't have many harmonics. It doesn't have any upper register harshness to it. So it's pretty boring as far as waves go. So if I were to plug it into a filter, for example, and I have a filter right here, the filter 8. So let's make sure that's an audio rate. Turn the resonance down a little bit. Let's get another cable. By the way, if you're wondering about the modular synthesizer, you can think of it as basically a pedal board on steroids, and each of these little devices is like a pedal, right? They each do different functions. Some of them generate sound, some of them process sound, some of them create control voltages that then affect parameters on other modules and so on. So it's like an exponential explosion of sound design madness. So we're going to take an output from the filter here. We're going to plug the oscillator straight in to the filter input here, and then we'll take the filter output into the oscilloscope here, and then that output to my sound card, my audio interface. All right, so when you have a sine wave, the sine wave doesn't have harmonics, so when you filter out harmonics from it, all you're doing is turning it down. There we go. Right? This one is not a perfect sine wave, so you do get a little bit of, here, this is like the perfect sine wave right here, and then as I open it up, we do start hearing some upper register content because it's not a perfect sine wave, right? But regardless, it's pretty boring. So what we need to get a really cool synth sound is actually a waveform that's richer in harmonics. So I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to change over here on my oscillator. This is the Ether oscillator by Vibrazo Modular. And we're going to change this to a saw wave. So now look at that. That's the saw wave, right? Why is it called a saw wave? Well, it looks like the teeth of a saw, right? That you used to saw some wood. And it's really harsh sounding, right? It's really annoying actually. So when you filter it, and here's our filter again, this is what you get. In fact, if you filter it enough, you get back to the sine wave again. Hear that? It looks and sounds more like a sine wave, right? But then I open up the filter, and now we're starting to already get some of that synth bass goodness, right? So here's the thing. This is the string, right? It's what's vibrating. It's what's generating the initial note. And you can change the frequency and you can change the waveform. The pulse wave is another good wave for this kind of a thing. And you can change the pulse width of it, right? With this knob over here. And then you can filter it as well. Right, so this is the pulse wave. If you make it the pulse is exactly symmetrical, becomes what we call the square wave. So if you've heard of a square wave, that's what this is, right? And when we filter it, again, look at that, it turns into a sine wave. So a sine wave is basically a wave that's just a fundamental tone without any upper harmonics. And the other waves have harmonics. And when you filter out frequencies, as you cut out those upper harmonics, it turns into a sine wave again. So this is, what an envelope filter is doing in pedal form. It's reading the loudness with which you play the note, and that's affecting a filter. So when you play loud, it opens more. When you play soft, it closes. So you get that wow, wow, that auto wah kind of a sound going, right? Now, there are other things you can do. For example, you can control the amplitude, right? So instead of going straight to the output here, we can use my VCA, right? The VCA is a voltage controlled amplifier. So everything's voltage controlled on a modular synthesizer. So the Ether is a VCO, voltage controlled oscillator, right? This is a voltage controlled filter. So I can send the voltage to control that up and down. I don't have to do it with my fingers here, right? And then the Morph 4 has 4 VCAs. So I can plug the sound here. Oh, sorry, we want this on the first channel here, right? Now I can control the volume manually, right? Or I can control it with voltage. Right? And so now I have filter, which is frequency control, controlling the timbre, right? This is affecting the timbre. And I have volume control over here, which I can control with something like an envelope generator. So the Contour 1 is a function generator, which can act as an envelope generator. Envelope, what is it? Envelope is basically the attack, decay, sustain, and release portions, which can control both filter and frequency. So if I take the output here of this, and this is looping right now, if I put it on level input on my VCA, I start getting this rhythmic thing there, right? Now if I send that to a splitter, see link 2 here is a splitter, I can send that same signal from the Contour 1 to both control the amplitude and the filtering, right? So I'm going to take another output of the splitter here and send it to the voltage control input of the filter, right? And then we can make this slower, right? This is the speed of the decay, right? And we can make that note lower so it's more bassy. Already, we can add some resonance here too. Already we start hearing that synth bass kind of a sound, right? Now, if I want to control it with a keyboard, I can use This is my sequencer here, the ground control. I can choose track 1 and use the pitch output of track 1 to the pitch input of the oscillator, right? And then I can use the gate output to control our envelope over here. So I'll take it out of loop mode. So now it's going to wait for some kind of trigger or gate, right? So now it's only going to make a sound when I press a note. So here's the bass. Right? Isn't that cool? Already we have a synth bass patch, very simple. Basically one oscillator, pulse wave going to a filter, filter going into a VCA up there, both VCA and filter controlled by an envelope generator and oscillator pitch being controlled by a controller keyboard. Right, and this is a sequencer, so I can actually record. Right, I can make the envelope a little snappier here. I can also use a separate envelope to control the amplitude and the filter, which is more advanced a little bit, which is more interesting. I can also use like other things, such as, for example, an LFO, which is a low frequency oscillator, and I can use a filter in high resonance in low frequency mode. So as you see, the LEDs here go up and down in between red and blue. These can also control the filter. So we can go into the linear FM input of the filter here. Cool, right? And here we can see that waveform changing. We can go back to a saw wave if we want. So now it's more acid, more like a 303 kind of a sound, right? Right, okay. So I don't want to go too deep into synthesis because that's a whole other rabbit hole. So we're going to leave it at that for the explanation of how to make a synth bass on the synthesizer. And now we're going to go over there to the anagram and replicate these principles using the bass as the oscillator. And we're going to figure out how to make it sound somewhat like this. All right, you ready? Right, so when I saw that Darkglass had come up with a nice new fuzz for the anagram, I thought this is a good opportunity to come up with a cool synth bass sound. Why? Because a fuzz, what it does is adds harmonics, just like when I switched from the sine wave to the saw wave and the pulse wave over in the synthesizer, right? So basically what I did here is I'm going to explain it quickly and then I'm going to go and recreate it in depth so you can see step by step. So basically first I have a noise gate, right? So that you don't get any extraneous noises. That's one thing, to have like a nice clean articulated sound is the first step to sound like a keyboard is being played rather than a stringed instrument that can have like these extraneous vibrations happening, right? So a nice noise gate followed by the compressor to sort of just even out a little bit the dynamics. Then we have an octave, right? The sublime over here. But what did I do? I turned the octave level all the way up and the clean level all the way down. So automatically this is creating a synthetic sound. It is an octave lower, so you do have to kind of play up in the neck to get the same notes that you'd get down there, but it's generating a synthetic sound. So if I turn off our everything else here and only hear the octave, already it sounds pretty synthy, right? Because the octave is being generated and you're not hearing the original sound of the bass at all. So you're hearing a synthetic type sound, right? So then I put a splitter in here, and underneath, what do we have? Nothing, right? So what is this for? Why am I splitting it? Because I want to blend the clean octave sound with the fuzz octave sound, right? So I'm gonna go over here, the mood fuzz, mood 2 fuzz, right? In fact, let's turn off the splitter and we'll just hear the mood sound. So what's that doing? This is changing that kind of boring, very fundamental kind of a waveform that we generated from the octave pedal, and it's turning it into a more interesting, richer in upper harmonics waveform with the fuzz. That's what a fuzz does. It's basically turning it into kind of a square or a saw type of a wave, right? So now we have material that we can use for subtractive synthesis. Why is it called subtractive synthesis? Because you start with a rich wave and you subtract from it. You subtract volume and harmonics, right? Volume with the VCA, not the case here. That's more applicable to the modular synthesizer. And frequencies by filtering, right? And we have the Moger, the Moreira, whatever they call it, envelope filter here. And that's filtering the fuzz sound based on how loud that note sounds, right? In fact, if we want it more pronounced envelope, you can turn off the compressor here, and we can let more of those dynamics go through, right? And over here in the filter itself, we can change parameters about it. So already this sounds like a synthesizer, right? The real challenge with this is to get like the sweet spot, to get the right balance of filter cutoff, drive, envelope. Envelope mix you probably want all the way in. Envelope amount. So that you can actually hear enough of a difference by playing the bass louder or softer. What's the poles, right? That has to do with dBs per octave that the filter is cutting. So for a 4-pole filter cuts 24 decibels per octave of the frequency. The frequency is above the cutoff. And the 2-pole filter is 12 dB per octave that's getting cut. So it's a smoother slope, right? 4 is more radical, it's more like a mini Moog, and 2-pole is more like an ARP Odyssey, I think. And so that's... It's different filter responses. I have mine on 4-pole here because I think it's a little more Moogy, a little more what we're going for here. Also, you can assign like an expression pedal for the filter cutoff here, for example, and then you can use your foot to really control and be super expressive about how you filter that synth sound, right? Now let's turn on the split again so we get that. We were missing a lot of that low end from the octave that's being generated once we sent it through the fuzz and the filter. So that's why I'm splitting it, sending it and mixing it back in. So the clean octave is getting mixed back in with the fuzzed, filtered octave. And already this sounds more like an actual synthesizer sound. Right, and then I have a little bit of a plate reverb there. Really not much, just to give it a little bit of that nice echo there. Let's go back to turn on the yeah, I do like it with the compressor. It gives it more sustain, makes it sound a little more like a synthesizer. And you can experiment with which octave you use, and there are other things you can do which we'll look into as well. Then I have just a limiter at the end here. again, because synthesizer, unless you control it with a volume, or unless you have velocity on the keyboard, which you didn't in those old keyboards, like a Mini Moog and Odyssey didn't have velocity, you're not really going to be changing the volume that much. So the limiter in the end here helps keep that the dynamics very consistent, which is more like a synthesizer as well. I have another preset that I made before I made this one that's pretty cool too. It's the fuzz synth here. This one's more like a lead, right? More like a solo sound. This one doesn't use the octave, so there's a noise suppressor. There's the splitter here. Now, this one does have things going on in the split down under here, and that's mainly the pitch shifter, right? So the pitch shifter, you have seven semitones, which is a fifth, right? And wet level 100%. In fact, we could have dry level at 0 on this one, because this is just to have like an upper note doing a fifth, right? And that's getting the filter here, the Mogi type filter, right? And that's going back in at the end here of a whole chain that I made, and you can determine how much. Right, so this is just a higher fifth there. And here I start mixing that top line of effects here, and that's again the mood 2, right? Add some bass to that. So that's the fuzz. Again, what it's doing is adding upper harmonics to our waveform so that we have something to filter, right? So again, this time I put the compressor after, right? So I was experimenting. And here we have the Gravitron, which is a different envelope filter. And you can choose low pass or band pass or high pass, but you want low pass for these kinds of sounds. So you want to cut the highs, right? That's going to give you that nice filter sweep. So maybe turn the sensitivity down a bit. Find the point where you like it. And different basses, are going to respond differently to this kind of patch. Right, and so after the Gravitron, I had played around with the phaser, but I didn't really like it, so I turned it off. There's a Jim bass here just to give it like an amp sound, which again you can turn off too. I just thought it didn't sound as nice, so for this one I did like to have. And then we have the merge here, which again you can determine how much of the octave, not an octave, but a fifth up, right? The pitch effect is not an octave down like on the other one. It's a fifth up, right? And we can blend them together here. And then there's an analog delay and a limiter again at the end. So this is another take on a synth kind of a sound. So let's do one from scratch. I'm gonna go here to an untitled blank, and this is how my bass is sounding. This, by the way, is the Joel Dart 3 from Sterling that I bought. I was one of the people who pre-purchased it in May. And it's a really nice short scale P bass type bass that I'm really enjoying. It only has a volume knob, so I'm not using, it doesn't have preamp or anything. This is just the sound of the pickup All right, so let's get started. We're gonna start with in dynamics here with a noise suppressor as usual. Right, then we're gonna maybe try the octaver again, but this time I want to try something interesting. So we're gonna go the pitch effects here, modulation and pitch. We're gonna use the octave, and again we're gonna turn the octave all the way up and the clean down, so we get only the octave sound. And here there's a filter here too, so you can make this a little bit richer in harmonics right on the octaver itself. So that may mean we don't necessarily need the fuzz. So let's see what happens if we add just a filter right after this. EQs, filters, and dynamics. Here's a low pass, just a low pass. Yeah, this is no fun because it doesn't have resonance. This is more of a utilitarian kind of a low pass filter. We don't want this. We want more of a synthy kind of a low pass filter. So for that, we're gonna, let's try the, what is it called again? Gravitron. Now this one doesn't have a resonance control, but it does sound like it has a bit of resonance. Right, and we could make it more or less sensitive. So that's already sounds quite a bit like a synth, but let's try the other one. Morpher. I'm just gonna call it the Moog one, right? And this one does have filter resonance here, and pole. Now I just had this idea. I'm having to play up high, right? Because we're only hearing the octave below. So what would happen if I were to compensate for that by using a pitch shift up? So I'm gonna get the pitch shifter here, right after the octave, and we're gonna tune it up 12 semitones, and with only the wet level. So now we're back to the normal octave of the bass. And we're applying two pitch effects simultaneously. One is an octave below that generates the synthetic waveform based on the note that I'm playing on the bass. And then we're pitching that back up an octave, so we're back, but it sounds different. Like if I turn the filter off, this doesn't sound like my bass, right? This is what my bass sounds like. And then when I turn these on, so already without even a fuzz, right? Sounds synthetic. And I'm very surprised how low latency this is for digital effects. I mean, really, that's one of the beautiful things about the Anagram. It's how little latency it has. So now let's move this filter up, and we're gonna put the fuzz in there. So overdrive and distortion, and we're gonna put the mood 2 in there. And of course we can fiddle with the settings here, a little more treble to get even more harmonics that we can then cut with the filter. So now we can turn that filter back on. And now I don't have to play up here anymore. I can play. Right, let's compress it. Dynamics here, and we're going to use the luminol again. And we can even turn the output up a bit. Use the extreme ratio here. Now, here's something that we might want to do. For example, I kind of want to blend the octave. I feel like it's So I can use the EQ, for example, to add low end, or I can use another octave effect, or I can separate this octave effect in parallel. There are many things that I can try to do, but I think, oh wow, we're all the way over here. Let's just organize this patch a little bit. Okay. So in fact, I'm gonna use an EQ before the compressor, and it can be maybe this EQ right here. And just make it more beefy. So this is another idea. So let's name these guys so that you guys can find them in the cloud, right? This is going to be bass Fox Synth 3, save. And then we have Fuzz Synth. We're going to have to rename that so you can find it. We're going to call it Bass Fox Fuzz Synth. That was the one with the high fifth, not octave. Right? And then we have Synth Bass Fox. I think I'm going to rename this one as well and just name it Bass Fox Synth 2. And that's the one that's on my Instagram and on my short YouTube video that a lot of you have already seen. Save. All right. So that's it for this subtractive synth bass sound from the classic ARP Odyssey, Mini Moog, those kinds of synthesizers from the 60s and 70s. But now I want to show you some other ideas, like why is bass synth only relegated to that? Sure, those were synthesizers that were functioning as bass on those classic recordings, right? They were, in fact, many times replacing a bass guitar. They were being used instead of a bass guitar. But I have discovered some really interesting other ways to come up with synthesizer-y type sounds using the bass as the source and controller for those. And one of them is using my Erica Synth's Echolocator. All right, I'm back, and this time we're going to have a look at the Echolocator, which is a delay unit by Erica Synths. And it's a delay that's stereo. It's got ping pong, it's got filtering, and it's got shimmer, which generates pitches above or below the original pitch. It's got modulation. So with all of that, really anything that you use, even your voice, right? Therefore, the bass as well can become the source material for crazy atmospheric sounds that sound like synthesizer pads, right? So let's change to a fresh preset here. And we're going to do something real simple. We're going to just get harmonic booster and a compressor just to get a nice clean sound of the bass. The Lumino. And on the booster I like a lot of character, a bit of boost. Ooh, it's got out of tune. Let's tune up the bass. All right, so what I did is I plugged the echolocator into the effects loop of the anagram. So it's going mono in and stereo back, and I have already set the settings of the anagram so that it has mono send, stereo return for the effects loop, right? We need a little bit more volume here, so why don't we give it some output gain here. So this is basically just the sound of my bass, right, with a little bit of preamp and compression. Now I feel like it could be a little bit darker sounding, which would be nice. So a little bit more bass, a little bit less treble. So now I'm going to use the effects loop. So here in utilities, I will choose effects loop, which is a send and a return, right? And over here I have an ambient preset that I created. But I did a video about the Echolocator, so you can go watch that if you want to get more in depth about it. I just want to demonstrate a little bit of what it can sound like here. So now we're going to and from, and we can blend it accordingly here. Right? So there we go. You should definitely be hearing this in a stereo, so either wear headphones or sit in front of some studio speakers, because the stereo effect is a big part of what makes this so cool. And here we have a filter. And here's the filter Q is the same as resonance. So that's what emphasizes the cutoff frequency, right? And then the shimmer adds high pitches, right? In this case, it's high because we have it to +12, so it's an octave higher. So listen to that. Can you believe this is a bass? Now you can change the note, and you can get into some more weird intervals and more experimental types of sounds. You can add modulation, so here you have modulation speed and depth. You can filter it a bit more. You can add like infinite feedback and then use the filter. In fact, I have my MIDI foot switch with an expression pedal set to control this filter cutoff with my feet only, and I don't want to take too much time with this part of the video today, so I'm not going to set that up. So I'm going to just use my hands, right? And you can change the time of the delay as well. You can freeze it, right? It'll hold that buffer, whatever is recorded in the delay buffer, it'll just stay. And then you can solo over it. Isn't that cool, folks? Let's get a little more volume out of this over here. Yeah, unfreeze it again. Put that shimmer back into the octave there. We can turn some of that delay into more of a reverb. Turn the feedback off a little bit. And here you go. Maybe you want slower modulation there. So now I'm creating these synthesizer pad type atmospheres with the bass. So technically this is a synth bass as well, right? It's not the funky, mogy, bassy kind of a thing, but I think it still qualifies as synth bass. You're using the bass as a synth rather than using a synth as a bass. I think that's the main difference there. All right, so now let's check out the other pedal. Well, sorry, not pedal. There's no switch, so it's not a pedal. You can control it with a foot switch. Just plug it in the back here, and it becomes a pedal if you do that. But the point is that it has so many nice tactile controls that you really want it to be up near you, not on the floor, so that you can tweak these parameters. So that's why it doesn't have a foot switch on the unit itself, but yeah, you can use it with a foot switch. So the other one is the Xenodrive, and that one is based on wavetable synthesis. So let's check that out real quick. All right, so that was pretty quick and easy and painless to switch because it's the same form factor. So therefore, all of the same cables go to the same places and stuff. So let's have a look at this guy. This time we're gonna send it the effects loop. We're gonna make it full wet, right? Right, so this one, what it does is it creates a waveform that follows your bass waveform. when I play with the X wave and Y wave here, and you can watch the video that I made about this to get more in depth too. There's a whole video. But it does have a drive control, which is more like a traditional distortion overdrive kind of a thing. But then it has all these waveform. You have a gain for the shaper, and then you have waveform controls here. And you can see the waveform displayed on the panel right there. And what's cool about this one is to change that waveform as you're playing. This one's also another cool one to control with the MIDI expression pedal, maybe even two. And then you can use your feet to control the timbre of the instrument. Right, and here we have the mix. Modulation of the X wave, right? And there's a filter too. So you have low EQ, you have high EQ, and you have the EQ shift. EQ shift is like a cutoff. So between X wave, Y wave, filtering, and you have the rotate parameter, tone drive, very cool. So yeah, go check out the full video that I made about this unit if you're interested in what it does and you want to learn more about it. Now, for the last portion of the hardware, we're going to have a look at the Future Impact. I picked this up directly from the designer when I went to a synth convention in Berlin last year. Well, actually, the year before last year now. Today's the first day of 2026, and I went to Super Booth 2024, which is when I met this guy. I was walking past his booth and I heard somebody playing a bass and sounding like a real synthesizer, and I was like, whoa. I immediately had to like approach his booth and ask about it, and ended up buying my own unit. And I did promise him I would make a video, and I never did, so this is me fulfilling a little bit of that promise. This thing is amazing. This is an actual synthesizer. It's a digital synthesizer with a whole bunch of really awesome factory presets, as well as a computer app editor that lets you create your own presets. I haven't done that yet. It's been almost 2 years since I've had this, and I'm ashamed to say I haven't yet created my own presets. But that speaks to the quality of the ones that come with it. The sounds in this thing are so cool that I haven't really felt the need to create my own presets for it. So let's have a listen to some of the presets. So for this, I'm not even going to create a preset, not even compress or anything, or should I? All I'm going to do is add a send return, an effects loop, and turn it all the way. Right, and we do have to come to device settings here and change the expression to mono send mono return there, and then we turn it on. Turn the pedal on. Why does it say inactive? Reactivate. There we go. The presets have the blend setting already in them, so some of them let the bass sound through and blend it with the synth sound. So this is like the strings, right? This is a proper synth. And different than like a MIDI thing, it's tracking pitch, so you even track your bends and vibrato and everything. Well, since it is blending the sound, why not use a bit of compression and preamplification? So we'll go back to my favorite one here, which is the Lumino. And I like to use it with a full ratio here. Maybe faster attack and release. A little bit more output here. We can turn it down over there. And this time I'll use the Noble preamp. The Noble Clone. Even the harmonics, see? But it is monophonic, so you do have to play one note at a time. I'm not sure all of the presets are monophonic. I guess we'll find out. But this is a really cool pedal that I should use way more than I do. And yeah, this is a program is presets, right? And this is number 7. It has a whole bunch. So if I double press, it goes backwards, see? So let's go to number 1. Yeah, just listen to all the presets. And that's what this thing is doing, is tracking your pitch from the bass, internally generating a control signal, which is not exactly MIDI. I mean, it does generate MIDI, and you can use it as a pitch to MIDI converter and send this MIDI output to control external things. But already it's so cool that I don't feel like we need to do that. We can just use the internal sounds. Wow, that's powerful. Next one. Number 3. Number 4. This is more subtle. Number 5. And I love it that it's got this homemade feel to it. The graphics are kind of, you can tell somebody printed this sticker, but it feels very solid, very high quality, and it's clearly genius programming in there. can edit within it, right? You can edit parameters. So you can choose a parameter here that you might want to edit on the parameter switch here, and then use the edit knob to change something about that preset right on the pedal itself, so you're not stuck to the presets as they are. Right? Next one. We already heard this. Let's go to the next one, 9. Very cool. Next one. Sweet. And very low latency, almost imperceptible. Next one. It's cool that it detects if you're playing legato, it doesn't re-trigger. Right? It re-triggers when you play staccato. It changes the pitch, but doesn't re-trigger the envelope when you play legato. It kind of does sometimes. I think it depends on amplitude. And now number 12. Very cool. Wow, that's way high up there. 14. Ah, here's a chord. Oh, this one is splits. So you have one sound down here. And another one here. Very cool. Next one. This one splits too. You have this sound here. Next one. Ah, this one gives you a little, jumps up a little bit. So yeah, there's way more. This one's percussive. Very cool. Here you have a split too. Right, and like I said, you can go in the editor on your computer. And if you know about synthesis, which you can learn from me on my other channels, Synth DIY Guy, you can create your own sounds. I'm probably going to do a full video on this pedal alone. But I think this is going to be enough for today, folks. I've held you long enough. Thank you for staying this long. Thank you for watching. The channel is young. It needs some loving to grow so that I can continue to make these things. I'm working on some other cool ideas for future videos, some more like along these lines of for bass players, right? So this is sound design for bass players. I'm looking to make a music theory that even bass players can understand. So useful principles of music theory for those who have been skittish about learning it up to this point. So and many more cool ideas. That's it. Thank you. See you soon. Hit subscribe, hit like, comment below, and feel the vibration.